Right, we are live on another edition of the Edlow Podcast. Subscribe. I have with me Ryan Dostart. I just learned that today. We've been colleagues for I don't know how long, 12 years now, 13 years. You started a little bit before me, like a year or two before me as an attorney.
Yeah. I started 2011 is when I passed the bar and started practicing law. Very end December 2011. So we've been neck and neck pretty much over a decade.
Yeah, and I've been calling you Dostart the whole time. Well, I'm glad we've been talking about doing this for a long time, and I'm glad we have because I find your story is just so interesting. I mean, it's interesting because I think we have a similar background in that I don't think that you were always dreaming of becoming a personal injury attorney, and yet you've done it, and you've done it at a very high level for a really long time. And you even, I think, I think that it's important for people who are even in law school or considering law school to hear your story because you are a little bit like me in that you had to work your way through. You went to Lincoln Law School, and you're still an incredibly successful person, despite some of those challenges. So.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because I've got kids, and my oldest daughter, it's interesting. She's kind of at a stage where she's, getting ready to apply for colleges and there's a lot of pressure, for her. There's a lot of pressure, and she's her own, worst critic, and she's, we have these conversations, and I've told her, look, you cannot have done it a more haphazard, ridiculous way than I did. Anything you do is going to be, better off than what I did because it was rough and tumble, for me as a kid, really. Doing it.
Yeah. It's funny because we have very similar backgrounds in that way, and what I think is so interesting, like my son's graduating high school this year. I just went to dinner with him last night, and we were talking about his plans, and it's so interesting to see their lives compared to ours.
Yeah,
and it's just like do you understand how lucky you are? You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of weird.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's, it's kind of, and that's, I think we've talked about this. It's kind of almost like a double-edged sword, man. Cause I want part of, adversity strengthens you and allows you to, do great things and persevere. That's, you learn that through encountering obstacles, hard times and rising above. So it's always a struggle because, I've told my daughter early on, I remember we were driving, I think this is before she started, or it was her first year of high school. We're driving and I told her, look, I had these experiences. They shaped me. They made me who I am. I got to struggle through this adversity and become, the person I am today. You're not going to have any adversity like that.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to find it. You're going to have to find ways to challenge yourself, put yourself in a spot where you are uncomfortable and have to strive and succeed and fail and succeed. And, you're going to have to find that. And, for her, it was, we talked about, she's wrestled. She's wrestled for, she's in her third year wrestling in high school. And, I told her for her, this is a good way to find that because whenever you pit yourself against somebody else and you undergo the training and just the grueling nature of training and for wrestling and then competition, and it's you versus another person. There's nobody to blame, but yourself. You rise or fall in your efforts. That's a good opportunity to, excel through adversity. So
Yeah, dude, and it's funny. So Austin, my son, he similar conversations. Like I got some grit because I had to have it. Like, it's not like it's something that I was like, oh, I choose to make this, to get this extra gear. Like, you can only find it when you need it. And I think he decided this year to join the varsity basketball team in his senior year. I mean, he didn't,
Wow.
he walked on and he made it, and he worked his way up the team, But yeah, I find that the sports is a great way for him to get some adversity, learn from it, and kind of fail in some ways and feel bad about it, learn from it, do better, that kind of situation.
Yeah, and keep going. I mean, it's that's really kind of that's really the big thing for for her, I think, is that she'll do well, and other times she'll, if she loses matches, she comes back and she's practicing that next week regardless.
Yeah, super important. So tell me, where did you grow up?
So I grew up, the ongoing joke around the office is, I grew up with the hillbillies. I grew up in the hills for sure. Pleasant Valley, Pollock Pines area is kind of where I grew up. So just east of here, and yeah, I was very much out in the mountain area, and it was a good. We did stuff like it was all forest. My parents had like a 10-acre area out there right up against, the North 19, a bunch of national forest land. And we went through, me and my brother, we would dirt bike and walk trails. We knew every inch of that area. So grew up doing that. Different time, really,
Yeah. And so what did that, what was that like living out?
What was it like living out there?
Yeah. Did you have a great time? Do you have fond memories? Was it difficult?
Yeah, no, I have mostly fond memories. I mean, because it was a very much kind of a blue collar upbringing, like, I was a latchkey kid. A lot of us were. So, my parents worked. I mean, it was, I had, my parents worked. So I would get off the school bus. I remember very vividly, get off the school bus, walk home. And I was a kid, I was probably, this is like grade school, walk, and I had chores, I would stack, I'd bring wood into the house, I would, chop wood, bring it into the house. I had all these chores that I did before I did any of my schoolwork. And then I would feed myself, and my parents would get home late. My mom was, a banker, and my dad had his own business. And so it was like, my brother would come shortly after, and I would kind of watch him, and we were there till, 6 o'clock, so that kind of upbringing, I think, it instilled, a lot of good qualities in me as far as, we worked hard. And, I tell my girls now, me and Raina are always like, my wife Raina, we're always talking about like, our kids, we ask them to do, chores, and they're just like fall apart. Oh my God, I already emptied the dishwasher 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
Right.
It wasn't even, we just did that stuff because that was part of, what you do to, contribute to the household. It's just
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. It's like they're not used to it because they don't have to, and then suddenly it's interesting how the more adversity you have, the more you are required for, the more you get used to that. You know what I mean? Like I remember even going through college. I remember being at American River College and thinking it was really difficult, and then getting to Sac State and feeling the same way, and then getting to McGeorge, and then my sister, when I was at McGeorge, was going to ARC and complaining, and I'm like, "What are you talking about? Yeah. ARC is a breeze." You know what I mean? Kind of same thing with our kids, where it's like, they have to do the dishes once a week, but if they had to do it twice a week, they'd adjust. You know what I mean? And complain. Kind of similar situation.
Yeah, and to come full circle, kind of that's like, where the concern is with the adversity thing. I'm always worried, like, my girls are, they have it too. I don't want them to have it super hard, but they have it too easy almost. It's like they don't have to do those things. And I mean, we still have them do chores because it's important to instill work ethic and have them, do those types of things. And but it's really, it was out of necessity when I was a kid. you know,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's more kind of to try to like teach them how to be self-sufficient,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
Like I go to my daughter's room and I'm like, this is intolerable.
Right.
It's like a bomb went out. There's clothes everywhere and food containers. I'm like, no, you gotta, she, in a year and a half, she's gonna be out on her own in college, and
You don't want your kid to be the roommate that's the messy one, right?
No, she will be, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. So now growing up, let's talk about what kind of kid were you? Were you kind of a rough and tumble kid? Did you get in a lot of trouble? What was going on?
Yeah. Yes to all the above. Yeah. I mean, it was, I was definitely, so we were, out, you get bored and so we would do dumb stuff, man. We were definitely rough and tumble. Me and the neighborhood kids, I mean, some stuff was kind of just, prank stuff. But, we would also, drink and do dumb things that, a lot of kids do. But it was kind of one of those things where I had a real rebellious streak. I'm sure it probably today it would be some sort of, mental health diagnosis, probably. There'd be some medication for me or something, but yeah, man, I just, it was, I look at it's the other part of looking at my girls now and thinking like, man, they're such good kids.
Yeah.
Which, as messy as they are and as much as, I have to fight with them to get them to do chores on occasion, they're just good kids. I mean, I was an asshole, really. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, really, and I think part of that too was, I spent time with other kids that were rough, and we kind of all did the same things, but there were, me doing that as a kid, there were real consequences. So, I got in all sorts of trouble and got in trouble with you can't break the law without getting in trouble, so
right.
that quickly started for me at a pretty young age, man.
What are we talking? Like high school or middle school or what?
Yeah. I mean, I started getting trouble probably, so
you're like third grade.
So I came up with this thing. I mean, you look back as an adult, you look back over the course of your life and there's just some things you go, what was I doing? You don't understand it. Right. And so I remember, I remember middle school, I decided, that we should all, we should run away. This is like, seriously, dude, it was like third grade. It's funny you said that. I think it was like third grade. That's my recollection. So I tell these, I get these other kids. I was unfortunately or fortunately, I was a pretty good leader even then. And I convinced these kids that we're going to leave the school, so we come up with a plan. We bring clothes. We're going to leave the school. I mean, we got like a mile away from the school. And of course, it was like 5 kids. When 5 kids go missing from middle school, even back in, even back then in the late 80s, it was like, there's a big issue. Cops.
Yeah.
They're like, my parents get called and we got found and they took us back to the school. And of course, I really was the one who led that. And so my poor parents, man, I mean, as a kid, you see all these things that your parents did is unjust, or I did at least. I'd see these things as being unjust, or I wasn't, they didn't raise me right, or all this silly stuff. And then you have kids of your own, and you're like, oh my gosh, man, my poor parents. I mean, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I've had more than a few conversations with my parents, just telling them, I'm sorry for how horrible I was as a kid,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Was your brother younger than you?
Yeah, so I've got two younger brothers and a younger sister. My brother right below me is my biological brother, and I have a step brother, and then I have a sister who is adopted at a young age. That's quite a bit younger than me, but we're all pretty close. My brother right below me, we grew up together. Troy is his name, and he was a good kid, man. Followed me around. I have no idea, why he kind of, as siblings do. I mean, he kind of followed me around and looked to me for, my wisdom, and I was just a terror to him,
Yeah, I'm the oldest too, and where there's four of us, there's two boys and two girls, and we're all kind of spaced. My youngest sister is, I think she's 20 right now, maybe 21. So I mean, big spaces.
Yeah.
And so that's it's interesting how they look to you, and then you're just like, I was a dick too. I was a dick to my brother. I think mine came from, though, our situation was so difficult, and I was angry, and I just took it out on him. You know what I mean? Kind of situation.
I had some of that. My parents, they got divorced when I was really young. And so it was kind of all of a sudden there was this just less stability, in the house. There was less stability. And now all of a sudden we're kind of going back and forth between two houses. And there wasn't a lot of, I don't think, probably very good communication or coordination. So, man, it allowed us to get away with a lot of stuff, and all the dynamic that comes along with that. So, I mean, for me, it was more opportunity to party and do what I wanted to do. And, it's hard enough when you're combined, when you're in a unit, married, trying to co-parent. Divorced, it's very difficult, I think.
Yeah.
It becomes, so
definitely.
It was, so me and my brother, not so much. I mean, he was a good kid. I think part of, I guess, the silver lining, I mean, I started getting involved with the legal system. I mean, young, but really actually started experiencing consequences probably my early teenage years. I started, getting incarcerated and doing that, and spent quite a bit of time in juvenile facilities, which is hard to believe, but
it's funny because, like, knowing you now, I would never expect that you were that kind of kid. And are we talking about, like, things like you're getting in fights, or is it just like, underage drinking, or what was it?
Yeah, it was fights, just dumb stuff, stealing alcohol from liquor stores. I stole a vehicle.
How old were you when you did that? Did you have a license?
No, I didn't have a license. I think I was 15, maybe 15.
You're like the Rick Vaughn of the Dreyer Babich office,
dude. It
was
it was bad, man. The silver lining was my brother, I think, saw, my brother saw that, and thankfully, the partying and the people, that looked flashy, but he saw the consequences, and that there's no glamour behind that, so he kind of steered away from that and had a pretty different route early on, thankfully.
Wow. So now, as you're going through this, I mean, your parents, what are they thinking? I mean, are they like, snap out of it, kid? Are they paying attention to it?
Oh yeah. I mean, they were, I think it was one of those things. It was kind of interesting. I think as a parent, like, kind of reflecting on it now from a different perspective, I think you hope that if you're not tough early on, it'll just kind of work itself out. I think that's what my parents kind of thought. This is rebellious, it'll work itself out, because I was drinking then, and I was doing all sorts of bad stuff,
and are we now in the high school years?
Yeah. I'd say late middle school, early high school. I was partying pretty hard, and hanging out with people that partied. That was kind of, that's what we did. And then, I couldn't maintain that in early high school, and eventually they expelled me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was.
What high school were you at?
Ponderosa.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And Ponderosa, it was, there was nothing wrong with the school at all. It was me. I was, I was just, unruly, and I got in lots of fights. it was just unmanageable, kind of similar to, what you were talking about. There was a lot of misplaced anger and, just, I was a sad kid, so.
And where was that? I mean, at this point, if you're now in high school, right? Like, parents have been divorced for a while. Where do you think that sadness and all that stuff came from? Was it just from that situation or other stuff?
Yeah, it's a good question, man. I mean, I think it was some of that. It's hard to say that, it was just that kind of, that was just one particular instance. I think I think that was definitely part of it. But then also kind of all of us are wired different, like I have two girls, and my oldest, she is a maniac. She's a beast. She wrestles, I can put her through it. I can be a little bit harder on her. It's just a truth. My youngest, she's more sensitive. And thank God for my wife, because my wife's like, hey, look, we have kids that are a little bit different. We have to kind of, because I want to be like one, size fits all. I'm going to discipline this kid this way and this one the same. And that's not really always the best course, and so
it's so hard, dude. It's so hard.
Oh man, it's so hard. So my oldest, I'm like, just lay it down and she gets it and we're fine. My youngest, I can't really do that.
Yeah.
So, and the truth is, I think I was a sensitive kid, man. I was just, it was, I was a sensitive kid, and, so I reacted the way I did to my environment, and it got easier and easier and easier to just check out as I got, as I continued to, and then realistically at that point, you don't need a reason. You're an asshole, and, you're,
it's almost part of your identity, right? Like, well, this is what I do. I'm the asshole.
Yep. Yeah. And you just keep going that route. And some people never get out of that.
I know.
Never do,
I know.
Well,
what gets you out of it? What is it that changes for you?
Man, I suffered some big consequences. So I started, I spent considerable time in juvenile hall and camps, and you would think,
did you have to do the work camps?
Yeah, I did. I did a camp at a place called Foul Springs. It's kind of like I don't know if you know what CYA is, but it's like child prison. It was kind of a comparable thing to that, and you would think that, and then I got expelled. I took a proficiency test, and I think I was I made it 2 years in high school, 2 years, and then they were like, you can't be here anymore. It was like, one of my buddies that I do jujitsu with, small world, he's still up in my neck of the woods, and we do jujitsu, and so he's like, hey, remember that time? He's all I remember is like you got arrested at school, and I was like, I don't know. Probably. I don't remember
Which
that.
guy? Yeah,
I don't quite remember that. He's like, yeah, all I remember is watching you run, like you're running through campus and police officers are chasing you. And I was like, and I don't, what's scary is I really don't remember that, but I don't doubt it happened, so it was consequences, because I did that. And then I became an adult, and the idea was I actually turned 18 in a juvenile facility. And the idea was, I got it. No, it's gonna be different. I'm not gonna do this anymore, and I'm an adult now. But I was a brickhead in juvenile facility, man. I remember there was this guy, Jay. He was one of the COs there, and he was like, he told me, he's all, you got a brick on your shoulder, He said you're a block on your shoulder. He said you're constantly fighting, you don't listen to anybody, and he's all, you've got it. If you don't change that, then you're going to continue to get in trouble. And I was like, whatever, and I get out, I turn 18, I get out, and he was like, I was like, see you later. And he's all, next time. He said something, the insinuation was that, I'd be back. And then, man, he was right. I ended up, I literally turned 18 in that facility, got out, went back to the same friends. We started partying. got in more trouble, and literally went to county, was incarcerated again. And I spent, a soft year, turned 19, did a soft year in county.
Wow.
Which is about 8 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was the last deal? Was it more fights or was it something else?
Fights. Yeah, that was a bad one, real bad. And then, got out and this time I was like, so for the first time ever, we've talked about this. So for the first time ever, I started looking at like, hey, I should probably stop drinking.
Right. Yeah.
Like I drink, and I told Campora, I was joking around with him early on. He asked me, why don't you drink? And I told him, some people, I have an allergic reaction. Some people break out in hives. I break out in handcuffs in facilities.
Yeah.
I agree with you. So I literally, I got out of that facility, said I'm going to stop doing them. I got to stop drinking. I got to stop, hanging out with these people. And, and I'd like to say that was the last time, man, but I got out and, I didn't really commit to changing my friends, my group, the people that you need when you're doing something for a long time and you're going to change it, regardless of what it is, you need a new support group. And, I kind of found myself kind of hanging out with the same people again. And then I got in trouble again and did a 90-day stint again. And then that was it, man. That was it for me. I got out and, found some different people. I was doing, I found some different people, and that was really, that was a big thing. It was a big thing for me. And then, I stopped drinking. I haven't drinking since. That's, that was 24 years ago.
So backing up a little bit, you mentioned I found other people. So how does that inform the way that you teach your kids about the people they hang out with?
Oh, big. We've always been, I've talked to my girls and both me and Raina about, because my oldest, both my kids actually, they've got a little bit of a proclivity towards kind of trying to, take the broken toy underneath their wing, to fix them. And I'm like, look, man, that's great. And I love that quality in you. But there are times where they're just as likely to take you under their wing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're, who you spend time with, that's who you are, man. It doesn't matter if you say, I'm a good person, I'm honest, I'm hardworking. If you spend time with people that are lying and thieving, that's who you are. That's who you're going to be. It is. So, you want to be honest and righteous. That's who you spend time with, and you'll be that.
Yeah. So now I know that you met your wife, Raina, fairly young. How old were you guys when you met?
Oh, we were babies, man. So I was 19 and just, kind of just.
Are you in the midst of this or are you at the tail end, like trying to fix it?
No. So I was sober. I'd been sober for about 5 months and met Raina. She was 18. And then, I can't remember. I met her through some mutual friends. She was super. Believe it or not, it's kind of funny. I went to middle school with her. Didn't really talk to her a whole lot because she was loud and she had this whole gangster Latina thing going on, and I was like, I don't want that. And when we were kids, and so it's kind of funny. I knew she was. I just didn't really know her, and she was. We started talking, and I was, head over heels, really.
Yeah. So at the time, you had stopped drinking. Was she also not drinking, or how did that come about?
Yeah, she doesn't drink either.
Oh, okay. Wow. And where does that come? I ask because, I'm Mormon, so a lot of people I know don't drink, but it's rare unless you're religious, you don't drink. What is it for her that she doesn't drink?
Yeah. Well, I won't say for her. For me, it was kind of I found, I was the court system has gotten better and better at pointing people in the direction of things like 12-step programs. And those types of things, I think are, really beneficial for people who are looking to, find a better way and have a support group. And, for me, that was something that was necessary. So early on, that was kind of the direction I went.
So you joined AA and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So, and did that, tell me, I have family members who've battled addiction and had to go through AA, NA, things of that nature. How beneficial was that to you? Do you think you could have recovered without it?
It's an interesting question. I would say probably no. And a big part of that was the disease, the nature of like that obsessive compulsive behavior. You look around, every family, everybody I know has somebody they know that's been touched by addiction in some fashion.
Right.
Maybe it's gambling, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's drugs, maybe who knows, there's all sorts of forms. And I think what happens for a lot of people is they get so used to looking for something outside of themselves to change how they feel. You can't just take that away and survive. I think a lot of people kill themselves. You see suicide around addiction. It's a horrible thing. So I think, for me, I need to find, I needed to find a way to, look to something greater than me, and it doesn't necessarily need to be religious, but it needs to be something spiritual, whatever it is. And then have a support group, people that you can service. So that was the other thing, a lot of, 12-step programs offer people an opportunity to be of service. So doing things, doing the right thing for the right reason, there's a lot of horsepower in that. It's kind of really one of the things that I've continued to practice through. It's been a big part, because when you're using like that, when you're doing those types of things, it is so selfish and self-centered. So the only way to combat that is to do something selfless. That's really the only way to combat that.
It's so funny because I know that that's so true when it comes to the addiction, because I had a guy on here not too long ago who had a pretty significant addiction problems and then became a therapist. And he talks about, he goes, there were times where I was doing things I didn't even want to do it. Like I wasn't even interested in it, but it's just a compulsion and I did it even though I didn't want to, and it's just, man, it's rough. So now you're going through this, you meet Raina, things are going well. But you got expelled from high school. So how does one go from being expelled from high school to becoming a partner at a prestigious personal injury law firm? I mean, let me back up and ask this. Did you have an idea? You get out from your incarceration, you're sober for a little while. Did you have an idea of what you wanted to do?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no, here, I'll say this. I started out, I was so excited because I not only, had a high school thing, but I was a felon.
Right.
So shocking because I'm not now. I've since petitioned the court. I did it multiple times to have, wobblers reduced, thankfully. But so basically what happened was I was just so grateful to not be, stuck in that. I had different friends. I wasn't caught up in that way of life. I was so appreciative. I was living with a bunch of guys in a house. I had a good support group. I was roofing. And I'd always been, I've always been involved in the trades in some fashion. From as long as I can remember, I did, poured concrete, I did demo work, asphalt, everything under the sun. I drove a truck for a little while. Then I roofed. So I was roofing. And that was, I was making good money. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to be a roofer, and which is horrible work. Roofing is so hard, man. It is so hard. The sun's beating down. You fall off that roof. You fall through the roof. It was just, so, I did that for about a year, and I was with Raina, And I'm like, I think I have to go. I think I need to do something else in my body. I don't want to do this in my body. So I think I'll try school. And, I'd done okay in school before, but I never really, I was always messing around. And so I wasn't sure how I was going to do. Lo and behold, when I'm sober, I, tend to be teachable. So I didn't know what it was I wanted to do. I knew school was an avenue. And so I did community college for a little while. I did really well in community college. And
which one did you do?
I did Folsom Lake, and cobbled together, my 2 years between Folsom Lake. I probably did American River College too. I think they were all separate at that time. That was a long time. And then I ended up transferring to Davis, and I loved Davis. I loved everything about it. It was just inspiring. I started out at Davis pre-med, and I was going to do, and it took like, less than a few months to realize like, this is way hard. Yeah. Give me law any day. I mean, so I did that for a couple months, and it was, I liked it. I mean, and really, I probably, in retrospect, I probably could have continued on that path, but I ended up changing to, pre-law, did the humanities trip and did that through Davis, loved it. And then, was going to apply to, I was applying to law schools. My history came up, unfortunately. So, fast forward years, I was like, I've been sober for a long time, 6-7 years. 6-7 years. And so I'm applying to all these law schools and I had like great GPA. My LSAT score was unbelievably high. And I was being summarily, rejected from these schools that I should have been like welcomed with, scholarships into. And I was lucky enough to get one gal on the phone, and she was like, look, because of your history, we're not, we're worried that the state won't admit you. We're not worried about you passing the bar. We're worried that the state won't admit you to practice law.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, yikes. Okay.
So that stinks. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'd been kind of just focused on doing this and everything was geared up towards it. And it kind of ended up being a blessing because me and my wife ended up, so I graduated from Davis. I got into a couple schools. They're all back east. I was applying mostly back east. We're going to have this grand adventure, go back east. I applied to Boston and Thoreau and all these schools on the East Coast. And thankfully I didn't get it. I got in a couple, but thankfully didn't go because literally that summer we found out Raina was pregnant. And, surprise. And, so it was, I needed to work. So I didn't, I went back to work for a year. I was managing a Walgreens, which was miserable work.
I bet.
God, it was miserable work, man. And then, at the end of that, as I neared the end of that, Raina was, she saw that I was miserable. Felt like I was kind of in a spot where potential, unrealized potential. And I need to work because I had kids, I had, Mia, and I'm like, what are we going to do? And so she suggested actually night schools. And I started looking around. I saw McGeorge. I saw Lincoln. Lincoln was as cheap as it gets. And I'm like, try this, and that way, in case the state doesn't, admit me, I, didn't lose too much money on this law school thing. So,
yeah. Now, in the midst of all this, and, I want to talk about getting to law school, but I know one of the big things that you're very passionate about is fight sports. Mm-hmm. Where does that come into the Ryan Dostart world?
Well, yeah. So, I practiced, I think when I've practiced martial arts really majority of my life, in one form or another. And when I was a kid, martial arts were actually really kind of a reprieve, those moments, times where things were a little darker. I was able to dive into, martial arts, and it was a safe place, and I found some solace there. And so I started, as an adult, when after I finished school, I started getting back into, I did lots of weight training and all that, but I got back into martial arts and jiu-jitsu in particular. And I've been doing that for about 8 years now, consistently.
Let me back up and ask you another question. Just thought about. You mentioned dark times and things like mental health stuff. Do you think that had to do with the addiction, or is that something that even after you finished up with, you stopped drinking, did you have to deal with some of that stuff? And if you did, where do you get the reprieve?
Yeah. Well, I think, if you've talked to people on your podcast about addiction, I'm sure you've heard that it's when you stop, when you stop doing those things, really they're kind of just symptoms of they manifest as symptoms of, the real issue, and for me, that was, that was true, and I think for a lot of people, there is a searching, I think, that happens, and a searching, and as far as enlarging, looking to enlarge your spiritual condition. And for me, that meant, doing certain things like, taking a look at my past, making amends, learning about introspection, so that, I'm no longer reacting in a way that's, harmful to myself or others. There was a lot of, but I'm surrounded by people that are doing the same thing. So I was kind of learning from them, watching them, and I have friends to this day that, that started out kind of similar as me, and they're PhDs, doctors of medicine, really astounding, successful, inspiring figures. And, I just kind of watched what they did and did what they did. And that was, that helped and gave me the kind of fulfillment I was looking for. But yeah, because you could take away any substance and there you are, you have to deal with that void at some point.
Yeah. So the thing that's interesting, because I've found that there are some points in my life that I have just been very generally negative. You know what I mean? Like, I think I have a tendency to do a little bit too much introspection, and that, like, it's almost not like, it's good to be introspective, but then sometimes you're just beating yourself up. Right. And so, and then there are other times where, it's easier to be positive. So what are some things that you have done since getting sober that have helped you kind of, I mean, you generally seem to me to be a generally positive guy. Like, I very rarely hear you saying anything negative about your life, about things other than, like, I got this trial coming up and I'm buried. But other than that, like, you know what I mean? We don't really, you don't seem to me as being somebody who's generally unhappy with anything, which sounds so different than this person that you're talking about for the first 20 something years of your life, right? What do you do to kind of maintain that?
Yeah. So it is, it's all about perspective, and I practice a lot of gratitude. And, you'll hear all these little sayings, truisms, really, but, things like, gratitude is an action word, and it kind of goes back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier, like service. It's really difficult to be negative when you go do things for people that maybe aren't as capable. When you're doing the right thing for the right reason and really being of service, sacrificing your time, your energy, it's hard to come out of that and feel like, man, I just, I'm not, my life's not great. You never, you just kind of, it's service is a big thing that I've continued to do. It's a big part of, And really, people a lot smarter than me early on would say, you look at your motivation for being of service. If your motivation for being of service is to tell people about what you're doing, you don't have the correct motivation. You take a look at why you're doing it. So being of service, but not talking about what I do. So that's, so I don't really go into a lot of detail or talk to, you find things that you're passionate about where you can make a difference and you go do those things. And it's hard to not have a good perspective when you do that consistently. Not that anybody's perfect I still have moments where it's a combination of things. I think it's about being, grateful. I look at my past and I look at the things where I came from and I'm like, dude, my life is amazing.
Yeah.
I think of, the kids I grew up with, they're all in prison or dead.
Yeah.
That's just a reality. I for years as a young kid in my late 20s, early 30s, I would hear about so-and-so. Did you hear happen so-and-so? Got, he's going to be doing 18 years, and did you hear about so-and-so died? It happened so regularly that I was like, man, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. This is pretty good, and then, and then you add in things like, that are important. Like, for me, it's combat sports, and that's a big reprieve. And it's also another way for me to mentor, and people that are also interested in jiu-jitsu and teach them and be, have camaraderie there. But I really think service is a big, I can't say enough about it,
there's something about doing service for others that is very spiritual. And
sure.
I funnel that through my faith. Some people do it other ways, but there's something about helping each other that you're right. Like I tell my son, I go, there have been lots of times where I went to do the service and I was not feeling great about it, but then I never left regretting that I did it.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
That's the same for me. I'll go, you go, and there's lots of times where like, man, I would much rather be at home watching, TV with Raina, just, doing nothing. But then you go and you come out of that and you're like, man, I can't imagine if I'm just grateful I went,
Yeah, absolutely. So now as you're going through this, and here's another thing. You can't tell because of his shirt, but tattoos are a big thing for you.
Yeah.
So when did you get your first tattoo? And tell me about, everybody I know who gets tattoos, they get addicted to that too. So like, tell me, like, what was your first tattoo and why tattoos? What do they do for you?
What's interesting is I got my first tattoo when I was 15. Much to my parents' chagrin. They were like, "What is wrong with you?" And I was, and I started, and I guess I was smart in the sense that I never got any tattoos on my face. God, I know that's hard. It's like, of course not, or my hands, but man, I'm telling you, my friends, we were kids, 15, 16 in a garage with a VCR gun, like giving each other tattoos, it was horrible, and I came out of that with, I had friends that had tattoos on the sides of their heads or foreheads or fingers, and I remember, I made lots of poor decisions, but I remember just thinking like, it just seems like a bad idea. I don't think I'm going to do that, so I got, so I've gotten tattoos here and there, but I definitely, I think I was worried at one point. It's not the same now as it was, obviously, 15, 20 years ago. It's almost part of the culture now. Kind of interesting, but I've gotten far more tattoos. I started with one arm and I was like, I'll get some tattoos. And then like that arm was covered. And then I'm like, well, I'm not going to do my other arm. That's excessive. And then I started doing my other arm and then I was like, mean, it's and what it does for me. I think it's just I like the art. It's a sense of expression. It sets me apart. All those things. And honestly, I still had this not little, but I mean, I still had this rebellious streak.
Yeah.
I had this part of my personality that's existed there forever. I'm not harming people anymore. I'm not, at least those who, or, it's consensual if I am harming someone. It's but there's still that part of me that kind of wants to kind of buck the system or I don't know how to say it, explain it, and when I do that, that part of me is satisfied. And
sometimes there's something about just doing something a little rebellious and crazy that makes you feel alive.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, and I'm definitely, I went, I travel a lot. My family, we travel a lot, and my oldest daughter is very much like me. She's kind of, she's a bit of a thrill seeker, and we decided that we were gonna. I've never in my life thought about jumping out of a plane. Never in my life, just never even thought about it. If anything, the times I thought about it, I thought that's a horrible idea. And so we're in, I found this place. My daughter was like, I want to do this. I'm like, it's just scary. It's not. And I researched a little bit, and we ended up jumping out of a plane. Both of us. We went, and it was exhilarating. I don't know if I'd do it again, but it was definitely exhilarating. And, and it was fun. And it was funny because, several of the partners like, don't do that anymore. So
well, that's one of the reasons why it's funny, because I connect a lot with you because you do jujitsu, I do wrestling. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of a thing. But I feel the same way. Like you see some of these guys here, and everybody's got their story, and they're all very interesting. But I just feel sometimes a little set apart because it's like, I think I've told you before, when you hear somebody, they're like, yeah, so I did this wonderful thing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I bought a pinball machine, guys. You know what I mean? Like, they're just like, okay, that's different,
Yeah.
I got these Rocky action figures that I've been waiting for a really long time, and they finally came,
I got an arcade machine, and it's got like 1,000 games, dude, from the 80s, 90s. And I was so excited. My girls were just like, this thing's old. And I'm like,
yeah.
Dude. There's a Street Fighter. I've got every variation of Street Fighter you've ever heard of. I mean, all the old games I played when I was a kid that, it's just.
I remember I got one when I moved into my house. I bought one and I brought it home, and it had 680 something games on it. It had like Ninja Turtles, Simpsons, like all the old arcade ones we used to play when we were kids.
Yeah.
And my kids played for about 5 minutes, and they're like, well, let's go back to our Xbox and play whatever Fortnite or whatever it is. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, you guys don't get how cool this was, Yeah.
Different. They can't appreciate it. Different time.
No. So now you go to law school, and you started here. So we both worked as law clerks and worked our way up the system. Mm-hmm. When did were you in law school? Was it before law school that you got the job here?
Yeah. So I had a couple things happen. I think I started here in 2007 as a law clerk. And the reason I started here, I was kind of went this direction. I knew that we practiced personal injury. My stepdad lost his leg in a pretty bad motorcycle accident. And it was just devastating for my family. That would have been probably right around 2003. And it was something I definitely carried with me through law school. And so when I saw an opportunity to come to personal, I didn't even know how, I came here not knowing, I knew it was a big firm. I didn't know. I mean, we're not to sound immodest, but, some of the best in what we do, obviously. And
no, not some. We are the best as far as like in this area. I mean, like,
hands
one
down.
of the, there's nobody touches us. Right.
Yeah. So I was, I didn't know that going into it. I just knew what we did. And, but I came here 2007 as a clerk, and immediately I've always had this sense of, I don't like bullies. And, if there's somebody that, like I've always been a big, like, help the underdog kind of person, and when somebody is in a position where, they are, like our clients come to us, they don't have, they feel hopeless, powerless, dealing with these insurance companies. And, I've always seen that and saw, our capability, our ability to just really advocate, take their cause and take these guys to the mat, so to speak. And I saw that as a clerk and immediately was enticed, wanted to do that. And I set out to learn as much as possible, work as much as possible, do anything I needed to stand out and show that this is something that I could do.
Wow. So now, was this your first law job then?
First law job. Yep.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah,
mine too. Mine was actually a lot different than yours, a little bit different than yours. So I thought I wanted to be a prosecutor, right? And I couldn't find a job to save my life. I mean, this is 2008. Nobody was hiring anybody anywhere.
Right.
And Roger actually came to my torts class and spoke. And I go to church the next Sunday, and I'm like, man, this Roger Dreyer guy came to my class. He really sounds like he knows what he's doing. And they're like, oh, well, so-and-so knows Roger. Maybe you could talk to him about a summer internship.
Yeah.
And so he got me in contact with him, and I come in and meet Debbie, our office manager.
Yeah.
And it was like, they hired me, and I thought I was coming in. I mean, I would never, I can tell Roger this now, but like at the time I thought I was coming in to talk about an unpaid summer internship.
Right.
And then they offered me, first of all, it was a terrible offer, but when they offered me money, I was just excited to get paid. Right. And so it was like, you mean I get paid? And the whole summer, I thought I was only going to be working here for the summer. Right. And then they told me about a month and a half in, they were like, oh, it's going to take about 6 months before you really know what you're doing. And I was like, what? It was like,
right.
And so
here about to have guys.
yeah. And so I was like, and so I don't remember who I was talking to, but I was like, I think they think I'm staying. And I was like,
that's hilarious.
I guess I should,
Yeah.
And here I am, here it is 15 years later, and we're partners here. I mean, that's just crazy.
I actually, and it was funny because I was working at Walgreens when I started law school, and I remember, I was, making barely anything there, but I remember I came here, they made me an offer, and I remember telling Raina, and it was like half of what I made at Walgreens. I remember telling, Raina, my wife, that this is where I wanted to go, and and she's like, this is gonna be hard, but we'll figure it out. We'll make it work. And so I, took a huge pay cut to come, but the work was just, from what was described to me, it was going to be, exciting. It was going to be something that was going to be different. And, it was, it was crushing to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I was,
it sounds like our interview process was a little different.
Well, I mean, they told me, they definitely told me that I was going to be, crushed. I mean, that it was going to be hard work and, and all this stuff. It's funny because we can't say anything like that to law clerks now. You'll never hire anybody.
No.
It's like, now you got to be like, you'll just, 38-hour week. And
great work-life balance. Yeah.
Balance. Yeah. I mean, they're telling me like, you're going to die,
Yeah.
But
my interview process was so funny. I walk in and it's just Debbie comes in and she's like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" and I was like, "No, I'm pretty sure." And she's like, "I don't know if you understand." And then they bring in a guy. I won't say his name here, but you'll know who I'm talking about. He walks in and no joke, he looked like he hadn't showered for like a week, and he smelled horrible, and he was tired. He looked tired, and he's just like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I was like,
"Dude."
It was like, I thought I did, and then they're like, "All right, we're going to make you an offer." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Great."
Yeah. And really, I think, we're, you did the same I did. So I clerked here for 4 years, all through law school. And
me too.
And it was grueling, but if you can do that, I mean, and pass the bar and you're just, I really feel like I came out of that experience. I was like a 2-3 year associate. I mean, I would, my peers, when I would take depositions, I would listen to them and I'd see them and think like, man, that 4 years was like, it really gave me a mass of knowledge and allowed me to be more effective earlier.
It's funny too. This place made me sound way more intelligent than I was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I went and did the trial advocacy program at McGeorge,
Mm-hmm.
and I Witkened all the trial advocacy stuff because, which for those of you who aren't law people, the highest grade in the class. And it wasn't because I was particularly special. It's because I recorded every deposition that Roger Dreyer ever did. And I went to several trials where he closed. Yeah. So when I would go, I would do every cross and I would do every close because I'd seen it done perfectly 100 times.
Yeah.
And that makes you so much better.
Yeah, you really do. We're learning from, the masters of the universe, and continue to, but it definitely same, in law school, I was, I really learned how to speak to an audience and convey a message in a clear, compelling way,
Yeah.
And that was, I think that's it's kind of a lost art, man. I mean, there's lots of good trial attorneys out there, but fewer and fewer folks are learning it, I think,
Yeah. Well, and I think with the advent of social media where you're not having a lot of face-to-face interaction.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more I've noticed with kids, like, being Mormon, you're doing talks in front of church at 3 years old. You go to the primary, and then when you're 12, you start speaking in front of the whole congregation.
That's great.
And it just seems like so many kids have like these anxieties that, and I think, look, everybody, the first time they get up in front of a crowd speaks has anxiety, but because there's kind of a diagnosis of anxiety, some people, it's really interesting how less and less people are even willing to give it a shot.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man, but
social media, bad deal.
What's that?
Social media is, I'm not a huge, I think it's got some positives, but man, especially with our youth, man, I see my kids and I'm like, we've got them limited on how much social media they consume, but it's so mindless. It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
It's funny. I sometimes look at how much time, I'm pretty big on social media for a lot of different reasons because I got a lot of things that I post, but I've noticed sometimes I'm like, I get up in the morning and it's like, first thing I do is check my phone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Last thing before I go to bed sometimes, unless I fall asleep on the couch, which happens a lot. But anyway, so now you kind of always wanted to do this. Tell me now, your story is really, it's inspiring because there's probably people here. I know there's going to be a couple people here who've had very similar backgrounds to you that have kind of been in an area where they go, I don't really know what I can do. Right. Yeah. So what is the message that you have for somebody like that, given your story?
Well, I would say, the worst thing you can do is give up, obviously. Mm-hmm. And there's times where I know I had times where it seemed like really insurmountable. The circumstances were insurmountable. And, imagine that, I was, young kid thinking like I'm done. There's nowhere left for me to go. And that's such a sad thing, looking back on it. But I took small, just incremental. If you have a goal, you just take small incremental steps towards it. And sometimes it was like 3 steps forward, 1 step back. But I surrounded myself with good people. That's a big thing, man. I really believe in surrounding yourself with good people, and educate yourself. I learned as much as I could. I read a lot. I still read a lot. I'm always curious about things, stay curious, be of service, work towards enlarging your spiritual condition. And that looks different for everybody. For me, it was, I did a lot of reading. I learned about meditation. I learned about breathing. I learned about prayer. I learned about those things because they had a part in me, becoming who I am. And then, moving forward, despite, what other people, it's kind of funny. I remember early on, I remember there were a lot of people who were like, you're not going to be able to do that. You're a former knucklehead, you're not going to be able to do that stuff, and I just didn't believe that. I didn't always believe it. There were times where I was like, you're probably right. Probably not going to be able to, but I just kept moving forward. I kept, being a service, and if you continue to move forward and you practice consistency, things happen, and they look different. My idea was I was gonna get out of, finish UC Davis, and I was gonna go to some fancy, prestigious law school, and I went to Lincoln.
Yeah.
Instead, and I love my experience at Lincoln. Don't get me wrong at all. I really liked Lincoln. I love the professors. I got a good education, a top-notch education.
But definitely not what you were looking for.
No.
Not what you were expecting. Right.
Different. It was different than it's the universe has a plan. All you have to do is just keep moving forward, practice consistency, treat people well, and educate yourself. And then kind of, it might be different, but, things happen as they're supposed to. And I can't imagine if you would have said 25 years ago, where are you going to be in 25 years or 24 years? Where are you going to be? I wouldn't have guessed this. Right. I would have sold myself short. So I think it's important to, work hard and put yourself in places where you're uncomfortable, and grow from that. It's okay to make mistakes, practice introspection, but be gentle with yourself. All the same things I tell my kids, but you live that. If you live that and you practice consistency, then anybody can be successful.
Well, and there's a thing there, that's what really interesting what you said. You mentioned people calling you a brickhead. I think your brickheadedness probably ended up helping you out in that. I mean, because you're such a brickhead that when people are telling you can't do something, you're not listening, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. And it's definitely, I use some of that. I mean, not to be so cliche, but man, I use that, and I was like, man, I'm going to prove you wrong. And then that became more and more like, if somebody tells me, you're not going to be able to do that, or you're not going to be successful, or you're not, man, that's exactly what I need. If somebody tells me, having an antagonist like that is been fuel for me in the past.
Well, and that's something I agree. I mean, when people tell me you can't do something, it's fuel. It's fuel to make me want to do it more. Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah. Yep. That's awesome. So, well, it's interesting. One other topic I want to talk to you about is hearing all of this. You're rough and tumble. You're into jiu-jitsu. You're type A personality. You have to be to work here. You're also vegan. Are you still vegan?
So I'm mostly vegan.
Okay. You're like I'm vegan, except I still eat fish and steak. I love steak.
So I'll say, most of it was I'm kind of a big I'm kind of a big do what works for you person. I don't really subscribe to like any certain everybody's physiology is different. So what works for one person from a diet perspective might not work. Or when I say diet, I don't mean like limiting what you eat, but just generally what you eat. It's different from one person to the next. So for me, it was kind of years ago, like 2019, I think I've always kind of had high cholesterol, runs in my family. I've never really paid it much concern. My primary care doctors typically are more concerned about it than I am, which is,
right.
and I finally, I had this doctor, he was this Greek doctor, and he was just like, man, you're gonna have a heart attack, and if you don't get this under control. And I was all upset, and this guy's an asshole, and I can't believe he said that to me, and I told my wife, and she's like, well, maybe, we should be concerned about that. And so one of his questions were like, he asked me, how much red meat do you eat, every week? And I was like, like, what do you mean? Like every day? I mean, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Because, if you ask my friends that have, been friends for a long time, I ate a lot of meat, a lot of red meat. And I've always done that. And so I had this, crazy idea. I was going to, he told me just to cut down on the red meat. I took it, like I do. And to the extreme, it was like, I'm going to cut out everything, and just learn how to be, vegan. So the idea though, was I was going to use myself as the test study. I was going to do it for 30 days and then get my blood work done and see if it had any change in my cholesterol or any of the health indicators. So I did it for 30 days and my levels went down. I was like, oh, that's kind of, but it wasn't so much to where you're like, oh my God, and so another 30 days. So I ended up doing it for like 90 days, got to test again. It went down significantly, enough to where I was like, clearly what I'm eating is having an impact on my health, so I was hard vegan for probably 2 years. And then I started adding in some fish, and that's kind of what I've done. So I still don't eat red meat. I don't eat chicken really. I
just do a lot of like sushi.
I like sushi. The misconception is that you can't get protein if you're vegan. That's just not true, man. It's just not true. I mean, there's lots of ways. I mean, I slimmed down when I started eating like that, but I was still like, still muscular and still doing jiu-jitsu and had, if anything, I had pretty good energy, man. I was sleeping good. I mean, I just didn't really have those issues. Now that's for me. If you're eating, red meat every day and your blood works great, good for you, man.
Man. So now with that, did you notice anything as far as your inflammation? I know carbs have a lot to do with that more than anything, but did you notice that inflammation kind of went down too or anything like that?
So I don't know if carbs have, I mean, I've read different things, I'm reading this book right now called the Diet Myth, and have you ever heard of that? It's interesting.
I think I've heard of it, but I never read it.
Interesting read. So it really talks a lot about your gut biome and how important that is to ultimately your health. And I think variety for me has been key. Like I eat a lot of vegetables. I eat a lot of different things. So I think having more variety is beneficial. I do really hard training every week, man. I don't know many people, and this is going to sound potentially immodest, and it's not meant to, but I train, I'm coming up on 44. I train more than most 44-year-olds I know. I do, weightlifting several times a week. I do jiu-jitsu at least 4 times a week. And when I do jiu-jitsu, when I say jiu-jitsu, like I'm not talking about like a 30-minute class. I do an hour and then I do an hour of hard rolling. That's 2 hours. And I do that at least 3 to 4 times a week.
Wow.
And I've been doing that consistently.
And how many days a week are you lifting?
I do at least 3. And then I have at least 3 days of deadlift, squats, bench press. They're all compound movement stuff. And then I do 2 days of just hardcore stretching, because jiu-jitsu is, you're going to, I've had, I'm not the one to look at when I always say jiu-jitsu safe. And then I talk about, I blew out my right knee, my left leg was torn, I've torn my biceps tendon, people are like, what? It doesn't sound safe at all. So, I mean, if you do jiu-jitsu like me, you could injure yourself,
Right.
Part of what I learned through that process was, one, dial your intensity down to your technique. So, it's okay to have intensity, but you want to practice your intensity within your technique. And then you have to be mobile. You have to be flexible. I started stretching, and as soon as I started really stretching, working on stretching my hips, my shoulder girdle. I mean, I found that when I was real mobile and I was more flexible, that energy transfer isn't going directly to the joint, and so I do stretching at least, I try to aim for at least twice a really good, hour-long stretching session. So
wow, man.
Yeah.
So you're going hard.
Dude, and I cold plunge and sauna. I have to in
dude.
order.
Okay, so cold plunging, is it legit?
Dude, cold plunging is legit. I cold plunge at least 5 times a week. I was just telling Bob, we were talking about it, and I'd heard about it, and I was like, man, I've been doing it for about a year, a little over a year. And I bought like a fancy one, put it out. But I used to do it with my coach. My coach would bring one of those kiddie pools, and we'd fill it with ice, and we'd do it after a session. Like we roll and we all cold plunge. And I was like, okay, I kind of, seems like I feel reduces the inflammation. And then I did it at this place near here, and I really felt it. And then I bought one, and it's like night and day, man. I mean, I'm able to train as hard. I literally remember feeling like there's mornings I'd get up and I'd be like, God, my body just hurts.
Yeah.
like the idea of going to jiu-jitsu tonight after working 10 hours at the firm, I'm like, I don't even want to think about that. And it's not so now. And it does something to your mentality too, I think.
I've thought about doing it. Dude, I'm such a chicken when it comes to cold, man. I can't do it.
I think you like it. Everybody says that, but then if you when you start doing it, it's weird. It almost becomes kind of quasi like you look for it, and you learn how to breathe. And I was telling, I was talking to Bob about it, and because I started out, my cold plunge gets all the way down to 39, which is ridiculous.
Yeah,
and not something I would recommend. I was like, I'll test it. I kept going down. 39 is too cold. So, but I average about 45, and I do it for 3.5 minutes.
Wow.
I get in, I box breathe. So I do my breathing, and I just am cool. I'm good there.
Do you do it in the morning after a workout, before a workout? When do you do it?
So I typically, there's a little bit of literature out there that basically supports, that it kind of indicates that if you are doing like weight training where you have, you don't necessarily want to cold plunge right after that because it constricts your blood cell. It constricts the blood flow when you plunge. So you want that blood flow. You want that vascularity because that's important for, protein synthesis, and training. So typically I'll cold plunge like right after jiu-jitsu. That's good. All the inflammation, but everything's all fired up and I'll cold plunge right after, so I'll shower, cold plunge. And then I sauna usually in the morning. So cold plunge typically in the evenings. Saturdays I train jiu-jitsu in the mornings, and I'll cold plunge right after that. And then I sauna. Like this morning, I got up, saunaed, infrared sauna. I bought an infrared sauna at my house too. And I've got these compression things that that they use in hospitals. They're like for the basically compression sleeves for your legs, but I use those too for just got to, man. As you get older.
Dude, I'm feeling it. It's funny because I've been doing 6 days a week at the gym, and then wrestling twice a week and all that. And I started lifting like consistently 6 days a week 2019, so I'm coming up on 5 years, and it's just like, dude, the joints, you know what I mean? You're like, it doesn't feel the same as it did. I mean, I've gone away from doing a lot of like the big, I used to lift heavy all the time.
Yeah.
And I've gotten away from that and kind of done more, more lightweight, a lot of reps kind of thing.
Yeah.
To kind of make myself feel better. And, but man, I have to try that cold plunge for sure.
Dude, I think you're what, like 15 minutes from my house. You want to come by?
Yeah.
Just let me know.
Yeah, I will, dude. That'll be awesome. So now let me ask you, we wrap up. I appreciate you giving me the time. I ask everybody 3 questions. First, what would you consider your biggest success in life?
Probably my kids, man. Not that I have a lot of, not that they're their own people, but, me and Raina have really, I think we've worked hard at being good parents, and my kids are just really good kids. So I would say that's probably my biggest success, imparting who I am to them and watching them, take that and mold that into who they are.
Here's another question, not of the three, but there's another question. What is it that keeps Ryan Dostart up at night?
What keeps me up at night?
Yeah.
Probably around my kids as well, just concerned about them, finding their path, being successful, being happy, really, more. I tell both of them that being successful is not necessarily equate to be happy. And, if they can find happiness, then they're going to be better off than just being, financially or, successful in a career.
Yeah.
So, concerned that they might not find that, or might, experience speed bumps along the way, which I know is going to happen. That's all, I don't know if it keeps me up at night, but that's definitely something that, I think I worry about on a game.
Right. I got 4 of them, and I'm constantly going like, all right, one of them's going to screw something up. I don't know which one. They all seem like they're doing okay. Yeah. But somebody somewhere along the way is going to marry the wrong person, or is going to like take a wrong turn in college, or, make some mess, and, be ready for that. Someone's coming home for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, those are the odds, right?
Yeah. Now, what would you say is your biggest failure in life, and what do you think you learned from it?
Biggest failure in life? I don't know, man. I don't know if I really look at, it'd be easy for me to point to some of the decisions I made as a kid, and say those were, failures, but it's really hard to do that, and again, at the risk of sounding cliche, it really did make me who I am. And those things still drive me to some degree. So I'm going to kind of just punt on that one probably and say, I don't think I've had, any failures. I've definitely made some decisions that caused the road to be rough for me, and there, I would say that, I if there's any real failure, it'd be, and, I put my parents through a lot, and that is something I certainly regret. Something that I wish I had not, I wish me learning my lessons didn't have such an impact on people that I love. That's something that I am definitely, I would say is the closest thing that I can think of.
Yeah, man. Well, last question for you. At some point down the road, you're going to pass away, and when you do, there'll be a funeral, and someone will give your eulogy. What do you think is the one thing that you hope someone says about you in your
eulogy? That I cared about people.
Yeah.
I think that that I cared about people, that I did my best to show that through my actions. The people that I'm an extremely, I'm an extremely loyal friend, and people that I love, I will do anything for, and I think that that's something that, I tell Raina that, when that happens, just, have a giant party and tell stories about me, that'd be
cool. Yeah, man. And the thing is I think that you do care about people. And I think one of the things, I have always, I don't know if I've ever said this to you, but like there's a lot of people at this firm, but there's only a few that I feel competitive with, and I think it's a friendly competitive because you're so good at what you do. And I think the reason why, you're so good at what you do is because you legitimately care about your clients.
Yeah.
Like every time I hear you talking about a case you're taking to trial, you are so fired up because you hate the way the insurance company is dealing with your client. I mean, and that's what it takes to there's lots of personal injury attorneys out there.
Sure.
See them on every billboard on every freeway. Right.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why we do so well, like our firm, is because legitimately everybody cares.
Yeah. It's not just a dollar sign, and,
right.
and I think that there are, especially in a case that we're taking a trial, we're invested. I mean, this is, the cause is ours, and we care about our clients, and I think that is what, I think that's what makes us so good, at doing this, is because you're just so emotionally invested, and you really want to see the best, for this person that, has trusted you with their cause, so yeah.
It's so true, man. Well, this has been great because we've known each other for a long time, and I've never had like this long of a conversation about who you are. I learned a lot about you. I knew I was like, there's something in his past. I know he's got some skeletons.
There goes my political career aspiration.
Yeah. The Edlow Podcast has ruined Ryan Dostart's political.
Right.
But you know what, though? I think that there's utility. Like, seriously, I think that the thing is there's utility in people who have been able to turn it around, because you're an example for a lot of people out there who don't think they can. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing the story. For those who have listened, I hope you've gained something from it. You can find Ryan Dostart at Dreyer Babich, just like me. But I mean, Dostart. I did it again. Yeah. But I mean, of course, if you're calling for a car accident, you refer to me, not him. I mean, I know he's great and all that. But so, but anyway, that's another thing. Real quick before we leave is, man, I hope one day we can figure out a way to try a case together. You know what I mean?
Me too, man. It's the one it's the one, I wouldn't say shortcoming, but it's the area that I think within our firm, within our group, we could really expand on, and I totally agree. I mean, we're all kind of, we've got these cases and we kind of just get caught up in, doing our own thing, but man, there's so much that can be learned through co-trying these cases. I know there is,
Yeah. For people who don't know, there's every one of the named partners has kind of their own team, and there's not a lot of crossover between the teams. And like, Ryan's on the Buccola team. I'm on the Roger Dreyer team. We're kind of our own teams as partners now. So we're kind of even a little branched off from that. But because you're an upstairs guy and I'm a downstairs guy, we talk about our cases, but there's not a lot of crossover. I really hope that sometime we can get out there and work a case together and just learn. I'd love to learn from you guys the way you work, because we work our cases differently.
Yeah. Likewise, man. We'll make it happen one of these days.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. When the hostile takeover happens. Anyway, so everybody who's listened, thanks for listening. Subscribe as always. We still got more fun stuff coming up. Ryan, thanks for coming on and indulging me.
Thanks, Josh.